Can't hear you, Ben. Can't hear you, Ben. There we go.
Sorry. Welcome everybody to this session today. The session today is the truth about working in early years. We're going to explore real talk about pay, hours, respect, and really what's happening in the childcare sector. And I'm so delighted to be joined today with Kim and Mark, who both have an absolute array of experience in the childcare world. I've known Kim for a very long time. And Mark, I've heard so much about your experience, and it'd be great if you could both introduce yourself to the audience today. Kim, do you want to start?
Great, yeah, thank you, Ben. Yeah, lovely to be here. I'm really keen to hear the voices of early years and people's experiences. Certainly, really interesting. As you said, we've worked together before in the past for a number of years. And I currently work as the head of education and training for a childminder agency. About 30 years experience in early years, both as a practitioner and as a consultant and trainer. And yeah, really keen to hear of people's experiences of working in early years now. So looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely fantastic. And I think, with your background and the number of years you've spent in early years, it really brings an element of, actually I've seen providers, I've seen what providers do, I've seen what providers have done, and now you're bringing that kind of different perspective, from a childminding agency point of view now as well, which is brilliant. So it'd be really good to dive in, and explore what things look like and how you believe things look like in the sector in the session today. And Mark, don't mind introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, always happy to talk early years and geek out a little bit about the sector. So I'm Mark James. I'm also working at Tiny as head of quality. But my background, I actually started in primary and was always going to be a primary school teacher. And early years was a happy accident for me. So really interested if there are people joining that are thinking about this as a next step. I started working with children with special educational needs and also behaviour needs, and it led me to do an experiment to step into early years for a year to see what happens in early years development. And that was 15 years ago now, and have never left. But I've worked in lots of different parts of the sector. So predominantly for many years spent in the nursery sector, working my way from practitioner all the way through to nursery manager, and also in group roles, kind of supporting quality and supporting compliance, but always based and with the children, and always needing to be pulled out of the rooms to do any managerial stuff, because play and learning were my favourite bits. And now I've been in the childminding world for about 3.5 years. So yeah, super excited and passionate about the sector, and really looking forward to talking about it.
No, brilliant. And again, it's the same with Kim. You've got years of experience, and those years of experience, I'm sure it's come with its challenges. It's come with its high points, its low points. You've probably seen it all. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think absolutely, it's important to say that there are ups and downs, and there's been as a sector we go through challenge, and there have been times that have felt really difficult. But the one thing I've always found is the way we band together. And the support of the people in it is something that always just keeps you in it, keeps you motivated, and keeps you passionate.
No, brilliant. And before we start today, and before we dive in, my name is Ben. My background is actually a slightly different background. I've come through day nurseries. We had 11 day nurseries in our family. We had a team of about 250 staff. And it really, I kind of bring a different perspective again, in terms of from a managerial point of view and ownership point of view, how that team and how early years was how we made early years work for us. Yes, because I think there's definitely a lot of talk around, this is what early years is like, for me, but actually it's a case of what the companies are also doing and the providers are doing to make early years different for them and different for their teams as well. So that's kind of my perspective. And right now I run a company called Childcare Marketing, which is an agency. We support big and small providers with their marketing needs as well. So again, I have lots of conversations every single day with different providers. So I kind of can see from an overview point of view, I probably, in terms of work, I've worked with around 600 childcare providers. So I've kind of seen it all, which is also good. And hopefully I bring a different perspective as well to the conversation this evening. Before we get started and dive in, I just want to say thank you everyone for registering. We have 750 of you that have registered for tonight's session. If you can't watch it live, or if you're watching it live now and you're short on time, we will be sharing this session via email for reshare, and it will also be published to the Tiny YouTube channel, and it will also be published on Spotify as a podcast, so you can listen back anytime if you're driving, if you want to walk. Don't have to watch us, but you can listen at any point as well. So we're going to dive straight in. Now, the truth about working early is today, right? This is a very, very broad topic. And I think, for Kim, for Mark, and everybody listening, this is a topic that I think, we could argue it could be contentious. It's a topic as well that potentially can cause a few discussion points. And it's a topic as well that I think is at the top of a lot of people's minds at the moment. With lots of changes going on in the sector as a whole, lots of government changes that have happened, lots of changes that are potentially coming into the sector in the next sort of 6 months. I think there's a big shift at the moment in attitude, and a big shift as well in terms of what people want from their roles within the childcare sector. And the first thing that we're really going to dive in on is pay. Is pay fair? Is pay sustainable? Right? This is a topic that I've actually been asked a few times, and it's been one of those topics that I have a lot of providers saying to me, how do we know if we're paying our staff fairly? And I've had also on the flip side, people saying to me, how do I know if I'm being paid fairly? So, Kim, on this particular topic, right, in terms of pay, what are your thoughts at the moment around, is pay fair? Is it sustainable? What is your opinion on that particular theme?
I think first off, I can't speak from a nursery background at all, and I wouldn't attempt to because I don't have a nursery background. I think one of the conversations that I have very often is, as a starting point, financial well-being has to be a top priority. I think we ask a lot of early years practitioners, and I think, in a post-pandemic world, all the sort of situations that we went through and the commitment and the dedication and burnout, and there's a lot that we ask of early years practitioners, and really trying to sort of bring back in that joy and that passion and all of those other areas, for me, has to start with financial well-being, because you need to be able to look after your family well, you need to be able to pay all your bills, you need to, do all of these things first, and then it's so much easier to focus on career and training and all of the other needs, because you're pouring out all of the time. So that's my starting point. If financial well-being has to be an absolute priority, and fair pay, and that's something that from my perspective with childminding, they're able to do that and manage that a little bit more themselves. The power is a little bit more in their own hands to be able to give themselves the income that that they want to have. We obviously will support them within that, getting onto a reasonable first year salary, as well as higher incomes after that. So that's something that I'd love to sort of talk about as we kind of have greater conversation. But I think in this particular area, Mark might be a little bit better suited to answer that question.
No, I think it's you've given good insight there. I think financial freedom being being something that I guess everybody looks for. Me included. We're always looking at opportunities. How can we be happy in what we do, and b, making sure that we're happy in what we do, but we're also happy in terms of
rewarded for it.
Stable.
Yeah.
And that gives that stability.
It really is.
Whether it's at home, where it is.
Absolutely, and also having the opportunity for a bit of variation as well. There's that's quite a good incentive if you know that actually you have the potential to earn more because you want to go on holiday, or because you want to do something else, or because you want to upgrade and get a new house or do something. How does that opportunity work out in the sector on the other side? And I think we all need to have hope and vision and that bit of inspiration that we can change our world a little bit. And I don't think there is an early years practitioner who does not earn their income. They are amongst the hardest working people in any sector, always going above and beyond. And, you know, in this new world, it would be lovely to see people really being rewarded for that and to be recognised for the work that's done, not just in sort of the recognition, but the financial reward as well. It's a world to come, isn't it?
It is, and we've actually had a few questions through already, which is always good. You know, I love a good early question that comes straight through. But I've got a statement here which I'm going to put on the screen, which has come up, which is I got told today that I should start my own nursery if I want a pay rise. Now, Mark, I'm gonna bump this over to you in terms of that particular statement, but also on the financial freedom part. You know, with your experience and everything you've done, you know, what are your thoughts around that, and especially that statement that's
so I'll weave both in. I think it's a very broad question and a difficult one to answer because it is such a broad church across the sector. But I come with a few different hats, and I think both the nursery sector and the childminding sector, I think it's quite different actually, and we're looking at pay compared to the two. And I'll speak about the nursery sector, which I spent many years in, and actually is pay fair? No, actually, if we compare that to teaching and primary wage, there is a huge disparity between early years practitioners or early years teachers. And let's not forget, that's what early years practitioners are doing. They're educators, they're helping to develop brains, they're taking children through the biggest steps of milestone that they'll ever have in the rest of their lives. But this huge disparity between what you might get paid as an entry level practitioner versus a teacher. And I know that there are different qualification levels, but there's also about skill and workload. But there are some nursery groups that do that really well. And I've worked with, charity sector nurseries. I've worked with private nurseries, corporate nurseries. And I think I've seen charity sector nurseries try and do a really good job, but we also need to cover a broader challenge here, which is around the issues of financial sustainability that charity sector nurseries are facing, and also private day nurseries. For some people, it's difficult in order to make the nursery profitable. And we see so many nurseries closing or becoming part of bigger brands as a result of that. So I think that question of go and start your own nursery, I don't know the full context, but that sounds probably like somebody that's having a frustrating time and is taking that out on the staff that they're speaking to. But actually, there are some great nursery groups that try and do a really good job and pay the staff, a more fair wage. It's still not anywhere near what we want it to be. And I think that's where all of us still lobby and campaign for higher wages and higher funding rates across the sector. And obviously, we've seen higher funding rates for the under twos, which is great news. Coming in, which will hopefully be continued and may start to impact on pay. I think from a childminding point of view, I think that's probably one of the things that's drawn me to it the most, and working with practitioners. And my favourite thing at the moment actually is meeting people that I previously worked for a charity nursery group, and choosing my next role into the corporate world felt like a scary one, but actually there's a huge level of social impact in the work we do. And that keeps me really motivated, watching people who couldn't afford their own home being able to earn their own money. So I think in childminding, what's really interesting is you set your own rates, and actually charging in line with what nurseries get. We do see quite a lot of people joining us from the nursery sector that are previously nurseries and were able to have salaries that matched, if not exceeded, what they were getting as a manager, and having a better work-life balance, which I know will do. So I think it's a broad question. I'll try and keep my answers succinct, but yeah, I think that it needs to be better still, and there is huge disparity across the sector. So it's lobbying for more fairness across the sector and more kind of equal standards. And I think if people don't know, then reach out and speak to people and find out what people have been paid in different areas and what the standard is, so you can start having those conversations with where you're working.
I've got a little story on that, Ben, actually, for one of our practitioners who joined us a couple of years ago, who's actually a community coach now with us. She came from a nursery background, nursery manager, and during one of our sessions she said to me, as a nursery manager one Christmas, and this was just after COVID, and it was like probably just a year after, and it was still very difficult, and she said they were having a Christmas dinner, getting together, and it was like £30 per head, and she couldn't afford to go. And yet her first year as a childminder, she had taken her family on holiday twice. And for me, that spoke volumes around myth busting actually, you know, around childminder pay and what they can do. And she was working from home, working with her husband, was within ratio, and you know, it was a complete life change. And I've always kept that because it was such an impact on her own life, but also it was a real moment of myth busting as well. So yeah.
No, I think there's a lot of value in what you've said there, Mark and Kim. You know, likewise, I think the big thing really is that, yeah, I think you touched on it quite a little bit, Mark, in terms of funding. You know, that's at the moment in the sector as a whole, we know that's a problem, right? And that is a problem. You know, it's something that, especially for the day nursery owners, it's something that I hear all the time, and it's something that I know has been a problem. You know, it was a problem in our nurseries. It was a problem even prior to that, in terms of before I even came into the sector. So it's a problem that hasn't really gone away. And at the moment, there's a few really, really great people lobbying out there, like Early Years Voice. They're doing a fantastic job at really trying to get the voice of the whole sector, not just day nursery owners, but the whole sector, and really try to get the sector united in the best way possible. You know, albeit it's always going to be an impossible task, because you've got a lot of different opinions across the different parts of the sector. But overall, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But we know that in order for pay to really truly be fair and sustainable, especially in the world of day nurseries, the funding has got to change in order for the day nursery owners to have the ability to be able to pay their staff more. And I think that's what it comes down to. But as you say, you know, with being potentially looking at other options, you know, like childminding, you know, it could be another option for anybody that's listening now and in that position where they're feeling it's not quite working for me. And actually, it can give you a bit more freedom. It can give you a bit more financial freedom, as you mentioned at the start, Kim.
Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, pay is one key area, and I think, you know, pay and it being sustainable leads directly on to your hours and workload, because, you know, if you're looking at pay and you're looking at, okay, you know, this is how I get paid, this is what I get paid, it brings us straight onto this topic. And we've actually, it's actually one of those things where I've got a question. I just saw a question on the stream that came through, which is, let me see if I can share it. This is the question here. Here we go. I want to progress in my nursery, but a long-standing management, I don't think I ever will be. And I think, you know, if you're looking at it from the point of view of, oh, you know, I actually want to, I want to earn more, and in order to earn more, I've got to take on, in theory, more workload or more responsibility. And Mark, I'm going to bounce this one over to you, because you've been in, you know, through day nurseries for a long time. I mean, what has your experience been around kind of, you know, the ability for you to progress, but also the blockers potentially that are in the way of you being able to progress?
Yeah, it's really tricky. And I think thinking about the different kind of nurseries I've worked in, a lot of the work I did was going into nurseries that we'd either just acquired and therefore had been long-standing for a period of time, or were in a period of struggle. And you'd see sometimes cultures that were quite set. So, you know, people had been in the same roles for a very long period of time, and therefore there wasn't movement. And then I went to other nurseries which actually were really heavily invested in taking people right the way through, from apprentices up to managers. So what I would say as well is that, rather than do one big broad brush stroke here across the sector, and I don't know the person that I'm talking to here, but talking to them directly, you know, actually there are lots of different solutions in lots of different parts of the sector that might be open to developing people and developing their staff. I think my take on it is that actually we are struggling with keeping really high quality people in early years. The best thing we can do is work with those people that we've got with us, those people that we've trained as apprentices, and understand the way in which we work, and understand our ethos and our culture, and understand the community, and take those people right through with us. And I have seen that done very, very well. But I know myself that there were periods where I felt blocked, and did make decisions to move on, and that served me well in my life at that point. But I also think there's been other moments in my life where I've had open and honest conversations, and I would say don't assume that people know exactly what you're thinking. And as a manager myself, I've definitely been guilty of it when I was doing that role. And I remember a member of staff coming to speak to me and saying that they were looking for progression, and I had no idea. And I thought this person was great, but I just hadn't put two and two together that that's what they were looking for. And I was able to then work with them and help develop them. So I think keep your lines of communication open. with your management teams. And if you're not getting anywhere in that space, then there will be nurseries that would love to develop you with experience and knowledge. So, really, really do look and start reaching out, have those conversations, but keep that option in your back sleeve if you need it.
No, 100%. I think the questions come up at exactly the same time, Mark, as you were speaking, which is, should I challenge my manager on benefits and pay?
I think,
nice and easy.
It is really tricky. And I think sharing some, I guess, the frustrations I had was that I always wanted to look at what we were paying staff and salary. And I worked for great organisations that were always open to that and were willing to listen. But it wasn't always as simple as that. And we, had to just to keep the doors open, the lights on, was our day-to-day challenge. And then when we moved into a space where things are feeling better, you then reward the people. I remember working for a large charity organisation who did exactly that. We went through a really tricky patch with staffing retention. And once we'd got ourselves through that, we're at a financially sustainable place, we were the ones that were rewarded. And I think I would have always kept a really open culture when my team came to me to say, hey, what's going on with this? And transparency, I think, is really important. So I think do challenge and you might surprise yourself and get someone who might open up to you about the challenges they're facing, and also speak to your managers and say that actually a little bit of vulnerability sometimes is good for us as a team. Share with us why you're making those decisions. The why is really important. And if you don't feel that you're getting it, say that really upfrontly and say, can you give me the why so I understand decision making here?
Yeah. No, definitely, and it's something I learned from Kim actually a long time ago. And funny enough, I had a session with Shaquille and Cheyenne from Group 12, who we're actually doing a webinar with next week. And the first thing they said, and it's something, Kim, you've said to me a long time ago, which is put your team first. And I literally thought, look, that's exactly it. Put your team first. Use your team. Ask your team questions, and if you're a practitioner and you're listening now, or if you're in a position where you're afraid to challenge your manager, go to them, challenge them, bring those ideas to them. And if they decide that it's something that they're going to go with, then they will, and if it's something good, they will go with it, then you just got to challenge, and you've got to be part of what I call like the community within your work, within your workplace. You've got to try and contribute to that community in the best way possible, a bit like we do on Facebook. I'm in a local group with Tewkesbury Community, albeit things they post in there are not always amazing, but it's a community. They're challenging each other, and it's the same thing that we need to apply in early years. We need to challenge a lot more. We need to kind of work together, but work together not only as a sector, but work together within individual nurseries, all the way down to apprentice level. You're thinking, I want to do something. I want to help them grow. Help them grow. Try and contribute in the best way possible. Kim, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Ben,
it's your
I remember those conversations. It was the days when I was out working with nurseries and delivering training and those things. And very often I used to be called in to say, preparing for Ofsted, and my starting point was always, it's got to be the staff, staff well-being. And this was a long time before well-being became, a thing. And really just prioritising the staff first and ensuring their well-being and their joy. And I think one of the things that I noticed in early years was that a lot of the joy had gone. Everybody was exhausted, really, just exhausted, and the cups were empty. And you've got a lot of really passionate people, but you can get compassion fatigue, can't you? Kind of for always giving and giving and giving. And I think people need to feel that they are valued and that they are seen, that they are heard, and that they are rewarded in all of these different ways. And honestly, early years practitioners are the most hardworking people you will ever come across, and they will keep on giving you more. And for me, they are the key to any successful business. And it's something that we continue, on this side as for childminders, that we want to prioritise, really equipping them, empowering them to do their best and providing everything that they need, so that they can go and enjoy the role that they've wanted to do. I'm a real believer in the whole dream life of doing the thing that you are most passionate about, because Mark and I, in fact, everybody we work with are all hyper excited about the work we do. We're very purpose driven. We enjoy working with each other. We enjoy our projects. We enjoy, you know, the hours and the workload. Sometimes people don't understand, but when you are on that role, you just give. You give because you are supported by your management, you know, and it's literally is the fuel, isn't it? And equally at the times when you need the support in another area of life, you might be going through a challenge or whatever, it comes back to you in that way as well. So it's not always that financial reward that you're looking for. It is the support. It is, you know, all of those other things that make for a good, healthy work-life balance. If there is such a thing as a work-life balance, I'm not sure. But, you know, it's making sure that you are happy to go to work, that you're happy there, that you can go through the difficult times and the heavyweight times you go through, because there are other times and you are still laughing and enjoying good relationships. You are enjoying achieving. And yes, you do put in the hours. And I'm never going to say you don't put in the hours, because you do. You absolutely do. You're in early years. It's just part and parcel of the thing, isn't it? But you know, you have the choice, I guess, as childminders, as to how many hours you do work, and you can design that yourself. But I think it's a bit more than hours and workload. It's kind of the whole purpose-driven thing, and that alone does give you an awful lot of motivation anyway, doesn't it? But it's really nice if you have a good management team behind you who've absolutely got your back in all different sort of situations.
Can I just interject there as well with two extra points that have spun into my brain? And one is that hopefully there are some childminders here as well, or possibly some childminding assistants. And for those that might not know that bit of the sector, childminders also have employees, which there is, and that can feel really difficult discussing pay and hours and workload, because it can feel really familial. You know, you've got this very small network. So I just would always say open, honest communication. If you're a childminder, speak to your assistant, find out, keep those lines open. If you're an assistant, you know, I know it can feel really difficult, but try and approach that conversation. And on this subject, and linking back to that question that Dustin put in about start your own nursery, the more people I'm talking to in the earlier sector that are still unaware of a huge change which came in at the beginning of this year, which is that you can be a childminder without domestic premises, which means for all intents and purposes, you can run a childminding setting, not in a home. Now, I always wanted to open a nursery, but I lived in London for many, many years. And in house shares, it was never an option to be a childminder in a big old house share, because that wasn't going to work. And I would have loved this if this was around 3 years ago. You can start what basically is a small mini nursery with up to 4 adults, so a childminder and 3 assistants or 4 co-childminders, and that enables you to start that own nursery that person said to go and do. So, you know, inquire about that if you want to find out about the childminder without domestic premises, because it does give you the option to start this nursery not in your home. It changes the whole perspective of childminding, I think.
No, it's brilliant. I think it brings us on to the topic of personal growth as well, because I think, you know, if you're in that position where you're currently thinking, I can't really progress, or I'm looking to start my own nursery, and I'm thinking, you know, what can I do? What's my next leap in my personal career, you know, and professional career? How can I personally grow? How can I personally develop? And I think, you know, Mark, what you've just said there in terms of, you know, being able to start childminding business, you know, not on domestic premises, you know, it's brilliant, because you're in that position where you can now, the power is in your hands if you've got the space and, I guess, capacity to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very much personal growth, I think, in general, just thinking about, you know, it doesn't always need to be up, be sideways. And I think, you know, talk about the things that make you passionate, develop a new skill, specialize in a certain area, because you don't know where that might lead to. My big passion was always music and movement. And now I'm involved in a charity project that works in music and movement in early years, which isn't a direct line up, but it's given me something extra and something really interesting I love to get my teeth into. And I think, you know, in personal growth, if you want to set up a nursery, you can do that. And there are schemes in some local authorities now for grants for you to be able to do that. I always wanted to do that myself. The challenge has always been that you need a certain amount of money to get through and get the staff in place to be able to do it. I think what's really interesting and exciting about this I need to call it the right terminology, childminder without domestic premises, is that it allows you to do that kind of while still working in it and build up your numbers. So you're not paying a whole staff team. You might just be paying one assistant to start with, or you might just have yourself in a room all about the facilities and what works. But yeah, very much thinking about those that might not want to do it in their own homes, or childminders that are here at the moment that may have outgrown their homes and think, actually, I can move this into somewhere else. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting part of it. But what I would just really kind of stamp on this as well is that personal growth is very much about you too, and how much you're willing to put in and learn and reflect. You know, no one can drag you there unless you really want to get there.
Yeah, I think it's key. And if you look at personal growth as well within, you know, wherever business you're in, right? It all comes back to, you know, what is it you want to achieve? You know, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? It's not a case of necessarily right here, right now. You know, I mean, I know a lot of people in early years, and I know a lot of people are very happy in the roles they're in early years, and they're great owners of nurseries. They have great facilities, great support and activity providers that I know, and their teams. They're absolutely fantastic, and they do a lot for their teams. They empower their teams. It's brilliant, and personally, a lot of those people are absolutely delighted. And if you're an owner, or you're an owner of if you're a childminder with an assistant, if you're an activity provider owner, if you're a day nursery owner, you know, really start to think about how you can empower your team as much as possible, because that leads your team to thinking that actually, you know, personal growth to me right now, I'm happy. You know, I'm really happy with my job. I'm really happy with what I do. And they're thinking about 5 years, they're thinking about 10 years, but ask them, talk to them what their plans are. And if they want to do something on their own, if they want to open up their own day nursery, if they want to become a childminder, why not help them on that journey? You know, help them on that journey. The motivation that you're going to get from your team is going to be absolutely massive. And I think that kind of, Mark, what you said there, it sums it up. You know, personal growth isn't something that necessarily has to always be up. You know, you can go sideways as well. You know, it can be one of those things where, you know, you're not just looking at it from the point of view of my career or my job. It's also like personally, you know, how much time do you want? You know, do you go and play netball every Tuesday? You know, do you go and play rugby every Wednesday? You know, what does it look like to you? Kim, I've got a direct question for you actually, which is I don't know why it's directed at you. But someone has asked the question. I'm concerned that my nursery is going to close. Do you have any suggestions on what I should do? Now, this question doesn't necessarily relate directly to personal growth, right? But I feel that it's one of those questions at this stage that kind of comes in because it's in terms of if you're in that point of view of thinking now about personal growth, you know, and I hope we've inspired you, so far. But from a personal point of view, you know, what suggestions do you have, Kim? You know, is there anything that you would suggest to that person that's asked this question in terms of, you know, what they could now personally start thinking about? You know, whether it's, you know, looking at other options or making that sideways step or making an upward step in terms of their career.
I think my first bit of advice would be to say, don't panic. Don't panic. You are gold to the sector. People, you know, we still need really good practitioners everywhere. I think, you know, sometimes we are presented with what seems like a challenge, but actually it could be the beginning of a whole new opportunity, and we see this quite a lot. It's definitely a time to reflect and reset and think about actually next steps, and take the time to go and have a look and see actually where do I want to go? What are my skills? What are my interests? What are the things that really, you know, ignite my passion? And am I achieving all the things that I want to right now? And you know, we always talk about the comfort zone, don't we? And the real learning happens outside of our comfort zone. And that was something that I never always understood. You know, comfort zone is a lovely place. Why do you want to move out of your comfort zone? You want to be there. But actually growth is so good on the other side of moving into that space of sometimes terror and anxiety and worry, and just taking that little cup of courage to go, I'm going to go have a look. I'm going to go and see what this, I'm going to feel all the worry about all of this, but actually on the other side, I'm going to do really great. And it's something that I think that we do really well with children, and we help them to be brave in different situations, and we help them to be courageous, you know, sort of courageous to do new things. but we haven't always been able to practice that ourselves because we've been in the routine of life and we need to maintain income and all of those things. I think you have nothing to worry about at all, and there are lots of great opportunities for you to explore as a practitioner, as a leader, or as a manager. There's lots, and yeah, we'd be also happy to have conversations with anybody that would like any advice or would like to find out more about any particular routes and opportunities.
No, that's absolutely fantastic, and I hope, you know, whoever asked the question, I hope that answers your question. And as Kim was leading on to there, it's like, you know, there are other opportunities. You know, we spoke briefly about childminding, and childminding is one of those that, to be honest with you, until probably about a year ago, I was always under the impression that childminding was a really small part of the early years sector. And it's absolutely not. Kim, in particular, opened my eyes on actually what childminding is and the impact that childminding is having as well on the sector. And there's a question that's come in directly relating to childminding. You know, is it a good way for me to progress, or will I need to learn a lot? And if you're in that mindset now, in terms of, oh, you know, is it something for me or is it not? I mean, Mark, you know, I guess from your point of view, because you've been there, right? You know, in terms of, you know, you've been through early years for a long time in terms of actually progressing. From your point of view, you know, is it a good way?
Interesting. I think there's a lot to learn, but that's not a bad thing. I think I had a real eye open moving into the childminding part of the sector, and like you, Ben, I was actually very naive before I joined the sector about what childminding really was and the scope that our childminders do. I mean, they are everything. They're the health and safety officer, the Senko, and it's so rewarding because they're seeing all of that face to face. And I think the fact that you've asked that question, is there a lot to learn? It's great that you're already asking that and not thinking I'm going to come from a nursery background and know it all, because the knowledge that you have from coming from a nursery background, the understanding of learning and development, the understanding of interacting with children and being, is a fantastic starting point and foundation rock. But actually there's the bits to learn about how you manage those parental conversations yourself and how you do all those lead roles as the person in charge. There's lots of different ways for you to learn. Local authorities tend to run training courses for childminders, and if you're going down the Ofsted route, that's something you can look at. Childminder agencies ourselves, it's a requirement to make sure that childminders have access to the right level of training. So we ourselves do digital training as well as webinar sessions. So there's different routes for you to take to learn, but it's good learning. And I think what we find, it's great when people come with that base knowledge and they're adding to it. It's a very transferable skill. It's a great piece of learning. I think, Kim, you work loads with our childminders that go kind of through that route and develop the training and the content and the webinars. So I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, for me, there's two sides to the business that we train on. We train people to become educators, is the first thing. Understand child development and understand, you know, EYFS at a greater level. We help them to develop their practice as educators, but we also help them to become business owners, which is very often something nobody has ever done before. So they have to register with HMRC, they have to understand, you know, tax. We do a lot of it for them and we equip them for that, but there's still a lot of understanding. Many people wouldn't have had a conversation with a parent other than a tour. So now you're going to have conversations around contracts, around fees. You're going to be talking about funding. You're going to be talking about all of these different things. You're also the safeguarding lead. You know, you're the Senko. There's lots, but we equip you in that way. And it's an ongoing journey. It's not a, you know, you've got to learn everything before you register and then you go. It's an ongoing journey all of the time. And it's an exciting journey, and there is a huge amount of personal growth within that. You know, I have a group of community coaches that I train and coach, and very often we do lots of reflection and we sort of say, do you remember when you started 2 or 3 years ago? Did you imagine you would be here doing this now? And some of the things that I get them to do outside of their comfort zone. I remember the first time I asked them to organise a toddle, they were terrified, like, oh, I've got to manage a group. Da, 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 da. Now they're happy to run training days. They're on it for all sorts of things, and there's so much growth within that, but it's within a nice, comfortable space of supportive people, and that's the thing. You celebrate one another's success. So yeah, I think, is there lots to learn? Yes, you're going to learn to be an educator, and that's always ongoing. You'll also learn to be a business owner as well, and the manager of your setting. And then obviously if you're taking on assistants, that's another level as well. So it's always ongoing, and that's really great that you've got room to move, go up, go sideways, manage your hours. If you want to work part-time, if you want to work full-time, there's all sorts of opportunities to work around your family or even with your family, which is very often a thing.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I think it's you know, I think, as you say, you know, there's opportunity, if you like, you know, in terms of, you know, looking at childcare as a way to progress, you know, and personally, it could be something for you, it might not be, but I think it's, you know, there is going to be a learning curve. You know, you're going to have to learn to be a business owner as well as be an educator. But Mark, there's been a sub comment that's come through on the back of this one. So this is related. Unfortunately, when I put them on the screen, it doesn't relate them up. But it's come through as what about as a male? Sorry. You know, I guess, you know, males in childcare, you know, it's always been perceived as potentially, you know, there's a stigma around it. And I think there's some fantastic people I know that are really lobbying for you know, for fairness, if you like, across the sector. But from your point of view, you know, I guess what's your experience in terms of, you know, yourself being in that position?
So I hadn't said this at the beginning. I don't think, Ben, you're even aware of this, but this is a great question. I'm pleased about this. I used to lead Men in Childcare for a London nursery group, and also for Mighty, which was the national board set up to try men in the early years, which was trying to attract more men.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's around about 4% of the workforce. It's very, very small still. There are some nursery groups that do that very well, some nursery groups that don't. And in childminding, it is still a very low percentage. And we do have male childminders, which is amazing. It's a really interesting route for some of our male childminders that actually have never worked in early years before. Kim mentioned one earlier on, where actually their wife has come in and become a childminder. They've seen it work and they've ended up working full time. We've got quite a few now across Tiny, where we've got husband and wife teams, and we've also got some solo male childminders that have come in. We've also had a fantastic guy that joined us, and actually him and his wife had met in a nursery, and he stayed at home and looked after their son while she remained in the nursery, and eventually she joined him. So it does go the other way around too. And I think that we need to do so much more to raise the profile of men in the early years. And actually, I met with male childcare and teaching jobs just yesterday to talk about this.
Oh,
Claudio, yes, we actually met yesterday afternoon. So this is straight off the bat. But yes, there is absolutely space for male childminders in the sector, and it's one of the big things that I'm really passionate about starting up, is a male childminding network, and we need more. We need to show this representation that, you know, we've started to change that mantra and perception that men don't exist in early years, and there's some really great people doing some really brilliant work, and looking at countries as well, in like Norway and Sweden, that do it particularly well. Lots of learning for us, but we really need to crack the childminding sector and show that at home family relationships also can be delivered by male practitioners. So yes, there's definitely a space, and if you're interested and want to talk to me about this for 4 hours, then you are welcome to reach out.
No, it's brilliant. I guess, you know, in terms of, you know, when someone asks that, I mean, you know, when someone comes with that question in terms of, you know, what about males, and you know, we're also on the overall topic being personal growth. You know, I think you've got to try and look at it as much as possible as the same as anybody in the sector. You know, you've got to try and look at it as if you're just an individual, a part of the sector. You know, you're not any different. You know, and that I think is a really key thing. And also, what you can do, you're not different either. You know, you can become a childminder, you can progress in early years. It's just that stigma around it. It's something that we really need to, you know, as the whole sector needs to keep pushing and keep driving away, because I think it's something that really can affect people.
I think it's about having networks as well, and I can see why that might feel like a step if you're working alone and not having that support network around you. So I think, you know, reach out to us and we'll build those networks and keep that conversation open. You feel like you're on your own.
Absolutely brilliant. And I mean, this leads on perfectly, you know, to why people stay in early years. You know, I think, you know, you've got the whole male stigma thing, you know, in terms of actually that being potentially a problem, and people potentially leave early years, or I've seen people leave early years because of it. But actually, you know, overall, I think it's one of those things where we're looking at, you know, why do people stay working in early years? And what is the main, you know, what is the main driver for that? And we actually had a comment that came through whilst we were talking earlier on about personal growth, which is, I'm an apprentice doing my level 3. I've been told I'll be earning £100 more when I qualify. I now feel mentally drained. You know, there's 100%, I guess, problems or perceptions in terms of, you know, I'm doing my qualification, I'm going to be qualified, I'm now going to progress, and you know, I'm sorry to whoever's put that comment, because, you know, you shouldn't feel mentally drained that, you know, you're qualifying and the increase is actually having that impact on you. And I think the big topic of why people stay in early years, you know, we need to look at it from the point of view of, well, it's a case actually of you know, day nursery owners need to look at it. You know, I guess childminders, if they're hiring assistants, need to look at it, because it's a really big topic that we kind of need to address, and we need to look at why people are leaving and how can we prevent people leaving. And if it is pay, you know, and if you are feeling mentally drained because that pay increase isn't going to be great, then we need to see what we can do to help, or what the sector can do to help. You know, it may be other opportunities, as Mark said earlier, and as Kim said, you know, it may be that potentially you need to make that next step, you know, just something different. But Mark, bouncing this over to you first, in terms of, you know, why people stay in early years. I mean, in your experience, you know, what is the main driver? You know, you've obviously stayed in early years. You haven't left.
I did leave.
You did? Oh no!
For 1 year exactly to the day. And actually, it was my first manager's job, and I took over an inadequate nursery. This is now maybe 11 years ago, and I had just been burnt out. I felt drained. I came in, the nursery was inadequate. We moved it to outstanding, which was amazing. It was a very large nursery, and we did lots of the business stuff, and I was learning loads. We talked earlier about, I loved that I'd not done the business stuff before, but I felt very drained having learned all of it at once in this very difficult and poor compliance. So I stepped away, and I went and did something totally different, and I flew as cabin crew for a year, which sounds really glamorous, and you'd think, why would you ever leave that? And I just found that what drew me back and has kept me here was just that it was my calling, and I love making the impact. And now I think that the discussion about pay that we had at the beginning is really key. And to use Maslow's hierarchy of need, hopefully people that are early years professionals will know that, you know, you need your basic needs met, and pay is very important to that. And it shouldn't be something that we shy away from being a motivator and being fair. But that aside, for me, I think it's about the working in the right culture. The places that have kept me the longest and have made me feel safe and comfortable are the ones that just help you to see the difference you're making and help you to feel appreciated. And I stay because of the impact that we make. I think it's that, as I said at the beginning, it's the biggest leaps of development that we had. I grew up in poverty and I didn't have the best early years experiences. And I think about inclusion and my passion around inclusion and diversity. Actually, what children see there will set them up for life. And we are genuinely shaping the children of the future, to quote a song lyric. But actually, you know, that for me is what keeps me motivated and keep me excited, and what drew me back. So I think, you know, you do really make an impact, and even when the days feel tough, and you can see the impact that you're making, that does make it feel worth it. There might be people here that are in a bit of a lull at the moment, are going through maybe an agency crisis in the setting they're working in, and they don't have the staff, and it can feel really isolating. And I get that it doesn't always feel sunshine and rainbows, but that's what definitely draws me back when I have those moments, and it just feels better again.
No, that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. I think, yeah, the insight there in terms of, you know, just being drawn back because you're so invested in what you do, and the impact that's having on people's lives, right? You know, I'm sure, you know, being in the sector 15 years, you know, I'm sure now, you know, some of the children that you met or the children you actually educated at the start are thinking about what career path they're going down.
Story, and that actually, I went back to the place I ran this nursery. And someone came up
Oh,
to me
wow.
in Asda supermarket and tapped me on the shoulder, and it was a parent with teenage children, and she's like, "It's Mark," and I have no idea who these people are. They have not got a space in my memory because there's been thousands of children at this point. And a song that I used to sing about, "I've got a grumpy face that looks like this," to talk about emotions. She's like, I only met the oldest one, who was now like approaching 18. And she was like, the song has come through all of our children, and it's part of something that we sing every week and have done. And like all the children were excited to meet me, and I had to pretend that, of course, I remembered exactly who they were. But like, you don't necessarily appreciate the impact you're having on people's lives and families' lives. And I think, you know, those are the really special moments.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess Kim, from your perspective, you know, what's your view on what's your view on the topic?
Childminders don't leave. We have a really low churn as childminders. I think because they have the opportunity to manage home life with work life, with raising their own children, and from babies all the way up to secondary school and beyond. So it's sort of slightly different that we have a lower churn, and so much more of the power is in their own hands to choose how they want to run their business. If they want to work part-time, they can. If they want to just do wraparound, if they want to just do 30 hours childcare, if they want to work 3 days a week, so that the flexibility is a little bit easier, that I think, you know, makes it a lot less sort of churn, that people stay in childminding for years. They do. They stay in it for years. It's 10, 20 years and beyond, because it works for family life. It works for income. It works for, you know, having a purpose and impact and all of those things. So it's different, I think, and I don't think I will comment on the other side, because it's a very different version, isn't it?
No, yeah, thank you for the insight. I think, you know, it's you know, I think you've got to look at it from the point of view of, you know, there's the sector's not just game nurseries. Right. And, you know, for those that are here, you know, you've got to look at empowering your team. You know, if you empower your team, then you've got so much opportunity for that team to be really motivated and actually really driving forward what they're investing in. As Mark said, you know, that passion for actually educating, you know, that passion for, you know, seeing a child 15 years ago and seeing them as a supermarket today, you know, and actually remembering something that you actually that you kind of ingrained in their family life, not even their personal life. And I think it's a case of, you know, I guess, and, you know, if I'm wrong, please tell me, but I guess from the point of view of yours, Kim, in terms of, you know, childminders, I guess childminders are empowered because they can make their own decisions. They can guide themselves. Whereas I guess some practitioners may not be feeling as empowered as they could be. Potentially is a barrier. But obviously, you know, that's me kind of narrowing it down heavily. You know, there's a lot more to it than just being empowered. But Mark, would you agree?
Like, I think for me, having been in a part of the sector which was losing people, and myself actually feeling quite burnt out at points, and I stepped into childminding to experience a different part of the sector, which kept me really excited. I joined when we were 200 and something childminders, and we're now 1,400 childminders, and that's in 3 years, and it's been really nice to be part of the growing sector. And actually, we know childminder numbers have fallen in the last 10 years, but it's nice to see now that they're helping to grow them. And I think that feels, as someone really passionate about it, really exciting to see people re-engaged. And we do see lots and lots of people coming in, and lots of mums that have had their baby and never worked in early years before and suddenly understand early years development for the first time and think, I don't want to go out to work, I want to stay with I'm watching them. Almost what's been really nice for me is to learn from them, because they have no background in early years. They're coming fresh with different ideas, and you learn bits from them as well. So it feels like a really niche, quite interesting part for me. You're talking about professional growth. You know, actually for me, it's really interesting to see this very different group of skills coming to it at different angles, and I'm definitely learning stuff too.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, you know, there is that side where you have new mums, new parents kind of coming in, And there are those that, similar to my own background, came from the corporate world. And there is a time in the corporate world where you question your humanity because you just think, really, this can't be it. And it's, corporate world is all great and it's go, go, go. But you do question it after a while, and you actually think, I've got to be here for something more. And for me, the turning point was getting married, having my own children, and thinking, oh my goodness, these little people, how incredible is this? And I lasted 3 weeks back at work, and I was like, you know what, we're going to eat beans on toast for the rest of our life. I'm going back home. And you just have that change. And I just think about a conversation I had today with a person who is a clinical psychologist who's literally switching, but the skill level that they have to bring, around working with children with additional needs, to working with children with, mental health, anxiety, and all of those sorts of things, and just being able to help them identify, actually look at all the strengths that you can bring to your community and bring that in, has just reignited everything and gone, okay, she can now work with her family, she can use all of her skills, she can develop a business. It's heady, it really is, because you kind of go, oh my goodness, this is opportunities that you didn't know you could have, and actually you feel empowered again to go back out and make a difference. And actually, what do they say, something about making an income while making an impact, or something like that. It's the double-edged. So we get to see it from both sides. We've had lots of teachers here. We've got people from all walks of life, really, and that's always exciting.
Oh, brilliant! And you made the last part of this session really, really hard for yourself, Kim, because I like at the end of every session, every webinar I've ever been on that I've hosted or helped deliver. I've always looked at the next steps in terms of, how can you give that last little bit of a snippet. And Kim, I think you've absolutely just exhausted your next step snippet there.
Sorry, I didn't know it was coming.
I just want to highlight the positive comments we've had through. We've had this is amazing, thank you. We've also had a few. I've changed my opinion on the sector. Thank you all. Some really, really positive comments that have come through here. We've also had one relating directly to yourselves, which is I've changed my opinion on Tiny. Thank you all. So there's some really, really positive comments. I'm glad everyone's got some really, really good value from this session today. But before we end, I like to do this as a really short one more thing. One thing. If you were today, in that position where you were like, right, how can I empower everybody that's watching? How can I empower everyone that's watching on replay? How can I empower everybody that's listening now on the podcast? Mark, what is the one thing that you would say to everybody that's listening today in terms of what's that drive? What is that one thing that's going to empower everybody?
One thing is always going to challenge me. What I would say is, what do you want? Decide what you want, because actually, you're the master of your own destiny, and there are routes wherever you want to go, whatever bit you want to take. We've told you some stories of people that we've worked with that have got to a certain place. And I think, if something doesn't feel right, don't get stuck in a rut, and please don't leave, because we need wonderful people in early years, and we are making a big impact. So, think about what you want, think about how you're going to get there, reach out to some people and have conversations, but it needs to start at that starting point of where do you want to go next. And it might not be up, it might be sideways, but there are lots of opportunities and different ways of doing things out there. And just reach out to the people that might be able to help you.
No, brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. Everybody listening, just reach out. Do what you can. In terms of personally, and do what you feel is, I guess, do what you feel that is the right way for you. I guess is the thing. Think about yourself. But that I think is really key. Kim, what's your close?
Mine is not so much a next step. Mine is a thank you. And we see you. We see you in the sector. And just for tonight, really, just appreciate your voice and your interaction and the feedback that you've given us. And we hope to have the opportunity of learning more from you and sharing more with you, because at the end of the day, we're kind of we are all the sector, and that's like the most important thing, that we want to, as we say, unlock the potential of every child, but we also want to unlock the potential of every practitioner as well on the journey. So we would really appreciate having, you know, the opportunity to speak to you all again.
Lovely. And we've got a session in 2 weeks' time. So anybody that's watching or listening, in 2 weeks from now, I believe. Is that right,
I
Kim?
think the next one's next week, actually, and then we go to 2 weeks. Yeah, I think we've got one
Apologies.
on the 30th,
Next
and then
week.
we've got 2 weeks after that. Yeah,
Sorry, everybody. Next week. Next week we have another session. So if you've enjoyed it today, please tune in next week. We literally in these sessions we're deep diving into really key topics within early years, and we want to deliver something that everybody can listen to and everyone can resonate with as well, as much as possible. And I've got a final comment just to share with both of you, being from Tiny. You know, I'm signing up to Tiny this evening. I'm going to make the leap. How fantastic! The value we've actually delivered.
Amazing, absolutely welcome. Thank you.
We will see you at more of these webinars on the other side.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I wish you all a